The White House says the U.S. military is always an option in the push to take control of Greenland. The target isn't an enemy state. It's territory inside a NATO ally. At first glance, it sounds like a bizarre real estate fantasy. But in early 2026, it turns into a real diplomatic crisis. President Trump says the U.S. will do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not. Denmark and Greenland answer with a blunt message: not for sale. Denmark's prime minister warns that forcing the issue would violate international law. She says an ally attacking an ally could mean the end of NATO. In Greenland, public opinion is lopsided. Polling shows about 85% reject becoming part of the United States. Many still want independence, just not that kind. So why is Trump pushing this now? Is it military power, critical minerals, or a broader contest with Russia and China? Greenland is vast and sparsely populated, about 57,000 people. It's an autonomous territory inside the Kingdom of Denmark, with its own government in Nuuk. That autonomy matters because Greenland's leaders say their future can only be decided by Greenlanders. They reject the idea that the island can be traded like property. Self-determination isn't a slogan here. It's the legal and moral center of the dispute. Any change in sovereignty requires consent, not pressure. Copenhagen handles Greenland's foreign affairs and defense, while Nuuk runs most domestic matters. That creates a tense triangle: Greenland, Denmark, and the United States.
In small coastal towns, life revolves around work, weather, and isolation. That local reality collides with global politics when outsiders talk about buying the island. The U.S. already has legal access in Greenland through a defense agreement with Denmark signed in 1951. It's why American military infrastructure exists there, even without U.S. sovereignty. At the center of that presence is the base in northern Greenland, now called Patuffik Space Base. Around 200 U.S. personnel operate systems that watch the skies and space. Those systems include early warning radar that can detect incoming missiles. In the Arctic, geography turns distance into minutes and minutes into national security. Greenland sits on the strategic corridor between North America and Europe. In a world of rivalry, that position makes it far more than an icy outpost. Defense planners obsess over a choke point called the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap, or GIUK gap. It's key for monitoring submarines moving between the Arctic and the Atlantic. In that corridor, ships and sensors track what passes through. Control of information can be as powerful as control of territory. Russia has expanded military activity along its Arctic coastline, and NATO watches closely. Greenland's location helps monitor what moves in and out of the far north. Patuffik is not just about sea lanes, it's also about space. The base supports space surveillance, tracking objects in orbit that matter for communications and defense. Early warning radar can provide alerts if a missile is launched on a path toward North America. The shield is made of sensors and time.
Trump believes full control would let Washington expand Arctic military and aerospace capabilities more freely. Supporters see ownership as a way to lock in long-term advantage. Trump says Greenland is needed for U.S. national security. He frames it as a front-line position in an Arctic race. U.S. officials point to a Pentagon shift that places Greenland's military oversight under U.S. Northern Command. It signals that Washington treats the island as part of home defense. Denmark argues Greenland is already protected inside NATO and existing treaties. Danish leaders say cooperation, rather than seizure, is the path to more security. As rhetoric escalates, NATO holds emergency consultations. The alliance is trying to solve a problem it was never built for. NATO Secretary General works on stronger Arctic defenses while urging restraint. Everyone understands the nightmare scenario: allies turning on allies. Canada and other partners warn against any unilateral change in Greenland's status. For Arctic nations, stability is part of security. In the Arctic, a small shift can change the whole map. In politics, a single crisis can redraw trust. Trump points to Russia as a reason to act, citing increased Arctic militarization. The U.S. sees Greenland as a vantage point in that long game. He also points to China, which calls itself a near-Arctic state and has pursued investments in Greenland. In Greenland, that can mean mines, infrastructure proposals, and strategic anxiety. The argument isn't only military. Greenland's geology contains rare earth elements and other critical minerals used in high-tech manufacturing and defense. Greenland is said to contain 25 of the 34 minerals the European Union deems critical. U.S. sources also cite dozens of minerals important for U.S. national security. These materials show up in everything from smartphones to advanced aircraft. When supply chains tighten, minerals become a geopolitical weapon. China dominates rare earths, about 70% of production and around 90% of processing capacity. That dominance makes the U.S. and Europe search for alternatives. In late 2025, China imposed new export restrictions on rare earths, requiring licenses even for trace amounts. That move increased urgency for non-Chinese sources. Warming Arctic conditions are making some deposits more accessible. For policymakers, Greenland suddenly looks less distant and more strategic. Trump's pitch is clear: secure resources and reduce reliance on China. He ties minerals to national strength and military readiness. But Greenland is hard to mine. The climate is harsh, infrastructure is limited, and environmental rules can block or delay projects. Oil and gas add another layer of temptation and conflict. Even with big estimated reserves, Greenland banned oil exploration in 2021 over environmental concerns. One estimate puts untapped oil and gas at roughly 31 billion barrels of oil equivalent, yet Greenland's own policy keeps that option off the table for now.
Economics shapes leverage, too. Denmark provides Greenland an annual subsidy of about $570 million, and any outside offer would have to match the basics that subsidy funds. Greenland's population is only around 57,000, so that support matters in daily services. The island's finances become part of the sovereignty debate. Greenland's GDP has been estimated around $3.3 billion. In an economy that size, even small foreign money can feel huge. Some mining investments are enormous by local standards. One rare earth project has been estimated at about $550 million. That's why Greenland is both a treasure and a challenge. The resources are real, but turning them into wealth takes time, money, and permission. This story didn't start in 2026. In 2019, reports surfaced that Trump had explored buying Greenland from Denmark. Denmark's prime minister called the idea absurd and said Greenland was not for sale. Trump canceled a planned state visit to Denmark in response. The episode faded, but it left a mark. It also showed how transactional language can collide with sovereignty. In 2020, the U.S. announced a $12.1 million aid package for Greenland, aimed at trade and investment. Danish and Greenlandic officials welcomed investment, but insisted it come with no conditions of ownership. Also in 2020, the U.S. reopened a consulate in Nuuk after decades. It expanded America's day-to-day diplomatic presence on the island.
Each step looked modest on its own. Together, they signaled that Greenland was returning to Washington's strategic map. After Trump returned to office in 2025, the Greenland question resurfaced fast. That year's election in Greenland brought Jens Frederik Nielsen to power. Nielsen drew a firm line: "We don't want to be American, we want to be Greenlanders." It was a rejection of annexation wrapped in an independence message. Greenland's previous leader, Mutibi Egede, had said something similar earlier. "We don't want to be Danish, we don't want to be American, we want to be Greenlandic." The sentiment crosses party lines. In the U.S., skepticism appeared even among allies of the president. Lawmakers warned that pushing Greenland too hard could damage treaties and alliances. Senators Jean Shaheen and Tom Tillis said the U.S. must honor Denmark and Greenland when they say not for sale. Their message was that NATO's integrity matters more than a headline. Then Trump escalated. In December 2025, he appointed a special envoy dedicated to Greenland. Reports named Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry as the envoy, and Danish leaders criticized the move. Greenland's foreign affairs normally run through Denmark, so the appointment felt like a bypass. Around the same time, Trump's advisor Stephen Miller said Greenland belongs to the U.S. The statement sparked outrage in Copenhagen and Nuuk. Rumors of influence efforts and political pressure swirled around the island. What mattered more than the rumors was the tone. Washington was no longer joking. In early January 2026, the White House announced a U.S. operation had captured Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. Trump presented it as proof that American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again. After that, aides described Trump as emboldened and newly focused on Greenland. He told advisors the U.S. must secure it the easy way or the hard way. Greenland's prime minister responded publicly on social media. "This is enough." He said Greenland's status is not negotiable except by the Greenlandic people. Greenland's foreign ministry said it cannot under any circumstances accept a U.S. takeover. Denmark backed that stance, insisting Greenland is not for sale. Denmark's prime minister said the U.S. cannot annex another country. She framed the idea as illegal and dangerous. She also warned that a forcible move would mean the end of NATO. The point was to show just how serious Denmark views the threat. France, Germany, Canada, and other partners voiced support for Denmark and Greenland. They emphasized sovereignty and the right of Greenlanders to decide their future. Denmark and other NATO members began bolstering their military presence around Greenland and the Arctic. The message was deterrence without escalation. In Nuuk, Greenlanders demonstrated outside the U.S. consulate. Even many who favor independence rejected becoming part of the United States. Polling showed about 85% of Greenlanders opposed joining the U.S., while about 84% favored full independence from Denmark. Independence, in other words, is not the same as annexation.
Greenland's leaders repeat a simple phrase: Greenland is not for sale. It's a direct refusal of being treated like a commodity. For most Greenlanders, this isn't an abstract chess match. It's their home, discussed by distant capitals as if it were a prize. NATO now faces its strangest stress test, the dispute involving the United States and Denmark, both members. Greenland is covered by NATO because it is part of Denmark. Behind closed doors, diplomats search for a way out. No one wants the precedent of coercion inside the alliance. In Washington, Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with Denmark's Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen and Greenland's Foreign Minister Vivian Motzfeldt. The meeting ended with Denmark and Greenland repeating that Greenland is not up for grabs. Denmark urged a focus on the existing defense partnership under the 1951 treaty. The logic strengthened what already works instead of rewriting borders. Trump keeps returning to one line: if we don't do it, Russia or China will. It's meant to turn Greenland into a deadline. There is real competition in the Arctic, and China and Russia both matter. But many analysts argue the U.S. already has the Arctic access it needs through existing agreements. That's why the debate splits into two words: access versus ownership. Access can be negotiated, ownership collides with sovereignty. As the dispute grows, NATO members talk more openly about Arctic deployments and defense upgrades. Denmark announces accelerated Arctic security efforts inside the alliance.
The bigger fear is political shock, an ally using force against an ally. Even the possibility forces governments to prepare for the unthinkable. Greenland becomes a mirror for the era: resources, security, and rivalry under pressure. The question is whether alliances bend or break. The White House says it is discussing options to acquire Greenland and calls it a national security priority. Officials say a deal is preferred, but the military is always an option. Advisors have discussed an outright purchase or a compact of free association, a model the U.S. uses with some Pacific Island states. Either route would still need Denmark and Greenland to agree. That's where things stop, because Denmark and Greenland reject any transfer of control. They say cooperation is possible, but coercion is not. In Congress, leaders talk about hearings and oversight. Some propose blocking military funds for any unapproved action involving Greenland. Trump has also hinted at tariffs to pressure Denmark. Denmark's exports to the U.S. were about $12 billion in 2023, so trade retaliation could bite. But economic pressure can ricochet, damaging the unity needed to counter Russia and China. It also doesn't solve the legal issue of annexation. International law and modern norms reject conquest, and Greenland's autonomy gives its people a say. Even discussing force tests the boundaries of what NATO members consider acceptable. By mid-January 2026, talks hit an impasse, and a planned round was called off. Trump reportedly demanded a roadmap to U.S. sovereignty or ownership, and Denmark refused.
No transfer has happened, and U.S. forces remain in Greenland under existing agreements. But diplomatic relations are strained, and the next step is uncertain. Greenland's leaders insist the future belongs to Greenlanders alone, and the world is watching whether this ends as a deal, a standoff, or something darker.
Did you find this helpful? Then hit those like and subscribe buttons and join me for the next video.